Hi, this is Anirban Saha, and you're listening to one new episode of GWF Podcasts, where we interview young and impactful conservationists. The idea of the Global Wildlife Fair podcasts is very simple. More young people should find themselves in the domain of the jungle, the wild, not only as scientists or forest officers, but also as authors, writers, illustrators, filmmakers, advocates, community leaders, or just be there. Conservation needs all of us. And it all starts with stories, very interesting stories, real stories. Each episode will meet somebody who has broken the mold, who has gone out of the way, out of their normal lives to do something meaningful for the natural world. This week's guest is very, very special. We have with us Aishwarya Sridhar. Her work in Panje was cited in a court case. The court case went for conservation. Her movie was celebrated. She got awarded and whatnot. She went ahead and made a lot of more movies. Aishwarya, hi.
Hi, thank you so much for having me here.
So, Aishwarya, in today's discussion, we dive deeper into your choice of topics because
Okay.
that is one of the domains where we have gotten most questions from. Your mastery in filmmaking, which you have spoken about quite much, and the impact that it creates in the real world.
True.
So these are the three things that we will concentrate on,
Brilliant.
right? Um, Paint us a picture. So when we are trying to set the context for this conversation, I think a best place to start would be by painting a picture where you explored Paje for the first time. Am I pronouncing the name correctly?
Yeah,
Panje?
yeah, Panje.
Panje?
Yeah,
Is
Panje
that
went.
how it's
Yeah.
Panje? Okay. So when you explored Panje for the first time, how was it? What struck you most about the place? And from there to making a movie, what was the journey like?
Okay. So, Panje is very close to where I live. So, I am born and brought up in Mumbai. And very early on, my family moved to a very small town called Panvel on the outskirts of Mumbai. Now, Panvel is not so small anymore. It's getting Mumbai's new international airport. So, Panvel is now progressing into becoming the next Andheri. But at that time, when I was younger, Panvel was a very quaint town which was on just below the foothills of Mathiran Hill Station, and it was a very green heaven. It was beautiful. So about 25 minutes from Panvel, there was a nice little fishing village called Uran, and Uran had these large tracts of wetlands and mangroves and marshes where hundreds and thousands of migratory birds used to come there every single year. So my daddy is a member of the Bombay Natural History Society, which is BNHS, and with my daddy used to be a big bird watcher. He still is a very big bird watcher, and he's very interested in wildlife. So I used to accompany him on his wildlife adventures, and it all began usually from our own backyard. So every weekend there used to be, a routine that I would accompany daddy, and we would go and see some wetland or marsh, and we'd spend about 1-2 hours at that place. So that's how first time I came across Panje during one of those childhood adventures. And I really fell in love with that place because I used to see lots of flamingos and painted storks and birds from Siberia, from Arctic, from Antarctic, bar-tailed godwits, black-tailed godwits, and snipes, and so many different migratory birds coming there to roost and feed every single winter. So during the winter months, it used to be a haven. And those few years of my growing up, I was like mesmerized by Panje. Then, as I entered my teenage years, I got to know that Uran was being taken up for a special economic zone project. And SIDCO, which is like the primary developmental authority of Navi Mumbai, had given off large tracts of land at Uran for a special economic zone. And that for me didn't sit very well, because they were reclaiming wetlands, they were reclaiming marshes, they were reclaiming mangroves for industries and for economic growth. Now, while I had no problem against economic growth and development of our nation, we absolutely must, but not at the sacrifice of our natural capital, which is so precious right now in on our planet as well. So I was left really wondering as to what would be the fate of these wetlands at Uran. And within, I think, 1.5 years, I saw Uran transform. So from being a birder's paradise, it became a concrete nightmare. And only one wetland remained, and that was Panje. So I really didn't want to lose Panje, because I have had so many childhood memories there. And there was this bird guide called Parag Gharat. And Parag is a dear friend of mine. Parag has really worked so hard to protect that wetland. He's part of the local fishing community over there. And Panje is not just put you all into context, it's not just a pretty wetland which has birds, but a lot of local fishing community members depend on that wetland for their daily income and livelihood. So people like Parag, he's kind of moved from being a fisherman to actually putting together his use of his knowledge of birds to be an eco tour guide over there. So he contacted me and he was like, Panje is going to go up for development. This has to be, is there any way in which we can save it? And that's how I began to brainstorm as to what could be, possibly done. And I had collected like so much videos over time, right from the time when I was an 8 and 9 year old child. So I said, I have so much stuff in my video library. Why don't I put that to use? So I strung together a short film which was called Panje, the Last Wetland, and it was made completely from archival footage that I had shot across so many years. It was a very I would say not a technically great film. Now that I'm a professional filmmaker, when I look back at that film, I'm like, technicalities are not right here and there, but it was a very soulful film, I would say, which was made with a lot of heart to protect that wetland. And thankfully it got a lot of love. People really began to open their eyes and understand that that wetland needed to be protected, because it was one of the last green lungs of Mumbai. So that's how then the campaign started. So that was my journey from being a quiet birder, a silent observer at Panje, to actually telling its own story.
I wish at least some of us here in Calcutta were as courageous or proactive as you were, because in the last 15-20 years, even I personally kind of saw with my friends who started birding at quite a young age. We saw
Yeah.
places like Rajarhat becoming a concrete jungle, and now hardly any birds come. I mean, birds still do come here, but not as much as they did 10-15 years ago. I could relate with the kind of setup that you were talking about, but from a point where you wanted to help, you had archival footage. What led you to decide that you want to make a movie out of the archival footages?
Because
Because a lot of us would think, okay, let's make a movie. We kind of forget that archival footages are there, so we'll like start from the scratch. So what led you to take the decision to make a movie out of the archive?
So see, because when I started from, if I had to start from scratch at that particular point, Panche had already changed. Not much. Of course, it still is a beautiful wetland, but Uran, I would say, as a locality, had changed. It was no longer the pristine Uran that I knew and I had grown up in. So, if I had to showcase that time that Uran was very beautiful, it had to be using archival footage. And some parts, of course, I did shoot of Panje in the current times when I made the movie. So I made it in 2018, just during my college finishing time. But yeah, apart from that, that's why mainly I relied on material which I had already like unknowingly taken videos of birds and the landscape in general.
So there might have been a lot of brainstorming that has happened, right?
Yes.
With your friends, with your father.
Yes, with my father a lot, with Parag a lot. And I also reached out to conservation organizations who are actually working in the space to protect wetlands. So I reached out to BNHS, I reached out to Conservation Action Trust, which is CAT, led by Devi Goenka sir. So I reached out to them. In fact, Devi Goenka sir is part of the movie as well. I have his interview as well in the film. And there's also another dear friend of mine, Nikhil Gokhale, who lived in Panvel only, and he used to also, work a lot for wetlands and local wildlife. So I reached out to him and his involvement, because he's also seen Panjay across years and the change that Panjay has had. So I reached out to this community of mine in Mumbai, and together actually we sat down and then we brainstormed what best could do, and then I put together the film. Because somewhere I felt that the reason why I chose to pick the medium of films is because somewhere we're all influenced by cinema. At the end, when you watch a movie, it does impact you. It does impact you emotionally. It does make you think, because films today are a very, very powerful tool to move people. Stories can really evoke emotions. It can inspire action. And growing up, I've been a huge fan of Sir David Attenborough. I still am one of his biggest fans, I would say. I've grown up watching National Geographic, sitting for hours in front of television. So deep down, somewhere I did really want to do something in the wildlife and film space. So this was like a chance to begin that journey. That's what I decided to do. That's why I picked, I think, a film.
Yeah. Sir David Attenborough is a league of his own. But
Yeah.
coming back, so you were going to Panjay since your childhood, right?
Yes.
So your next film was about a tigress, Maya.
Yes.
So when you explored that area, how did you come up with the idea that let's make a movie on this now?
See, Maya's story was not something that I set out to tell. Both these stories, in fact, I would say, found me more than I finding the story. Panjay was something that was in my own locality, and it was something I really wanted to save. And I thought that the movie would be like a best way forward to showcase to the developmental authorities that this place needed protection. Whereas Maya was a completely different journey altogether. So Maya marked my debut as a filmmaker, because it was a feature doc that I had made. So again, I had been visiting Tadoba since I was 15 years old. So I met Maya when I was 15, in fact. And I distinctly remember my first sighting of Maya also, where she stood her ground against an Indian bison. And for a normal young tigress to stand her ground against such a huge and massive animal like a bison, because bisons normally weigh close to a ton. And here was Maya, as a sub-adult tigress standing up to that bison and literally challenging it. So that dynamics really made me think that, she is going to be a unique tigress. She's going to be very different. And she sure was. I mean, she grew up to be the dominant tigress of Tadoba, ruling over the largest territory in the park, or controlling five major water bodies. She literally had like top five major water bodies of Tadoba under her control, which is again no easy task for a tigress. And she ruled till, I would say, the day she disappeared. So, and anyone you ask, anyone who's a fan of Maya will tell you the same thing, that they love Maya with all their heart. I mean, even today, for me, one of my favorite tigresses in the world will be Maya. And she has a place in my heart that no other tiger can ever occupy. I have grown up with her. I have seen her journey as she has grown into, from a innocent sub-adult to becoming the dominant queen. And I've seen her as a mother, as a ruler, as a queen, as a mate. I've seen her different facets of her life. So for me, that thing was really inspiring. And of course, there was a couple of incidents in her life which made me believe that her story needed to be told on the bigger screen and that she was meant for the celluloid. So, for those of you who know Maya, you all may know this story already, but in 2016, okay, and I'll go deep, okay, into Maya. I can talk for ages on Maya. I hope that's okay. Or you want me to cut short it, let me know. So in 2016, I was, I was there in Tadoba. After my exams, I had gone there, and it was a very quiet morning. And we found Maya and her cubs at Pandrupani Lake. And from there, she began stalking an Indian bison, which was on our side of the lake. And before I knew it, she had crossed the lake and she was on top of the bison and she had severed its hamstrings. She then called out to her waiting cubs and they came and they finished the job. 3 days later, she chased a barking deer towards her waiting cubs. And this time, she didn't touch the barking deer. She just chased the barking deer and it ended there. The cubs went and made the kill. And she was watching from afar with pride. So these two incidents, when it happened in the span of like a week, I felt that I had seen for the very first time a tigress train her cubs to hunt in the wild, which is very, very rare. Because seeing a tiger hunt is rare, seeing a training session unfold is even rarer. So
Wow.
that made me think that, this tigress, definitely her story had to be on the big screen. There was also another time when she brought back her former mate to kick out an intruding male to save her litter. And that almost was like a Bollywood film, playing out. So I was seeing a tigress strategize like an MBA graduate and rule her territory, and with the kind of intelligence and instinct that really redefined her wild genetics. So for me, that definitely meant that her story had to be told. So again, with Maya, I had, unknowingly taken a lot of videos. So as a tourist, when I had gone there, so I pulled those footages to use. I reached out to a lot of my friends who were visiting Tadoba very regularly and who had footages of her for those missing parts in my story. Because obviously I was doing school and I was not a full-time filmmaker at all. So that's how Tiger Queen of Taru was born, and then finally National Geographic Wild made it as a partner, and they took it home. So it aired on television in 21. In fact, it had a world television premiere. So it was a very surreal moment for me. A life literally came a full circle because I was a girl who used to love watching Nat Geo, and sitting in my own couch in that same living room, I watched my film air on television on Nat Geo. So it was like a real full circle moment for me.
But the full circle also led to you making two more movies on cats, and one
Yes.
of them is now nominated for the Green Oscars.
No, not the cat one. Another movie is nominated for the Green Oscars, not the cat.
But tell us about the two other cat movies.
With regards, so when I finished Maya, right, that's when, and it aired on Nat Geo and all. So up until then, up until 21, 22, I really wasn't in thinking about becoming a full-time filmmaker as such. Okay, I was not a professional in wildlife filmmaking at all. I was just I was just a girl who had finished graduation, who had made this one film out of a passion for Maya, and then it aired on television. So I was still exploring as to what I wanted to do as a full-time career. So that's when when I saw the love that Maya received, I felt that maybe, there is a chance for me to become a full-time filmmaker and a storyteller, and that I may have that skills in me to be a good storyteller. So, and in the back of my mind, I always had this desire that I had to document three of India's iconic cats. So I wanted to do a trilogy. So I said, okay, I've done one on tigers. Now, if I really want to go forward and become a full-time professional, why not pick one on Asiatic lions? Because that's something that had not been done before. So till now, there is no story which really follows a character of an Asiatic lion. So even with Maya's story, it was a very different way of storytelling. I presented Maya as a queen, as a mother, as a daughter, as this a queen who will do anything to protect her family and her bloodline. So there was a lot of drama, a very Bollywood style storytelling is what I used in that film. So I used those same techniques on the Lion film as well and made it a character led story. So this time it was of a female lioness named Noor, and how she raises her firstborn to be the king of Gir. And that was the story of Noor. And then after I finished the lion film, it's called India's Lion Queen. And now I've just completed, in fact, the film on Indian leopards. But this time it's not a female driven story, it's a male protagonist driven story. It's on one leopard named Rana from the forests of Jalana in Jaipur. It's an urban jungle. It's a very different story. It follows Rana's rise from innocence to dominance, and how he challenges his own father for the throne. And it's a mixture, I would say, of Bollywood meets Game of Thrones meets natural history. So I've really bent the genre of storytelling in this by putting in songs, by making it look like a typical Bollywood entertainment film, because somewhere I feel that when people hear the word documentary, they kind of, it's a biased opinion that, oh, it'll be boring. Wildlife, even more boring. So to kind of make people more interested in watching a wildlife documentary, I've tried to present the story of Rana again in a very character driven led way, in a way that has the typical Bollywood emotions, the highs and lows. There's romance, there's drama, there's suspense, there's, of course, thrill. So, yeah, all of that. That's how the other two cats have unfolded. So now I do have a trilogy of cats. So I have tiger, lion, leopard.
Very briefly, before we go to the next segment, could you please tell us about The Fading Star?
So The Fading Star is actually a project that is very close to my heart. It's a documentary project that's been funded by the National Geographic Society. And that's the film which has been nominated at the Green Oscars, which is the Wild Screen Panda Award. And that film follows the trade pipeline of the Indian star tortoise. So the Indian star tortoise is one of the world's most beautiful tortoises, but it's also one of the world's most trafficked tortoise. And that's a very sad part, because people worship this animal as a pet. It's they love keeping it in their home because they consider it as a symbol of good luck and prosperity. So because of that, there is a huge demand for this reptile, and there is an illegal black economy which has surfaced because of that. It is a protected species, no doubt, but it is still being trafficked silently. So this film sheds light on the plight that this poor reptile faces, and why it is absolutely necessary right now to put an end to such trafficking and save this reptile, because it's either now or never for this animal.
You're extremely passionate about your work. It shows when you speak.
I am. I'm deeply passionate about wildlife storytelling, and I really want to bring about a change with the kind of stories that I tell.
Soma Tripathi asks, where can we watch these documentaries?
So with regards to the film on Maya, so for starting from Panje, I'll go. Panje aired on Doordarshan in 2018 during Diwali. After that, it's not available right now to watch, because Doordarshan, aired it on television. But the film on Maya is available on National Geographic Wild. It's called The Tiger Queen of Tharu. Both the lion and the leopard film are coming to India soon. They are released right now in Europe and other parts of the world. With Fading Star, it's again scheduled to come to India very soon. Please stay tuned on my Instagram page, and I will be announcing the airing dates very soon. I mean, the airing platforms very soon, or for the Fading Star as well.
And when this video will be uploaded on YouTube, your Instagram ID will be right below your face.
Great.
Like where your face is now, right?
Awesome.
Okay. Our next topic is something that we already got questions during this Q&A, but we will keep it kind of short. Okay.
Sure.
I'm sure this is a question that you get often. Okay. What are the challenges in the field that you have faced just because of your gender?
Don't ask.
I did.
I can go on and on. Yeah, of course, there have been challenges, not just because of my gender, but also because of my age. So I have faced both the biases, because one, you're a young girl, you're young and you're a girl. So, people tend to take you very lightly. They do not tend to take you very seriously, especially when the first time with Panjay, and I was literally 19, 20, that age group of when I did Panjay. So I remember taking my film to the developmental authorities at Sitco and, having a meeting with the chairman and telling him that, look, Panjay had to be protected. And this gentleman turned around and told me that, you know, why don't you have anything better to do? I mean, why are you wasting your time into activism? Why don't you think of a proper career? Why don't you get yourself a good job? Why are you doing this at such a young age? You're literally wasting your time, is what he told me. So yeah, I've faced that. People don't tend to take me seriously. People, there's already a bias that when you're a woman, you won't you'll do things a certain way. You may not have the strength to lift certain equipment. I've been told that my camera is as big as me. So yeah, it happens. But while this, while there's negativity around, there's also a lot of people who encourage young women, who encourage girls out there. So I've met both kinds of people. Some of my mentors have been males as well, who've been very, very encouraging and telling me to go out and put in all the hard work to achieve. They've really pushed me to my limits. So yeah, I've had both. I've faced both, actually.
I will give you an uncle's perspective. Okay. So my niece will turn 13 now. She
Okay.
knows names of birds because I kind of got her into it. But when she wants to travel, her parents discourage that.
Right.
I try to have a conversation, but you don't want to hear that. So there are times I think, how safe is it on the field to be
It is
there?
very safe. According to me, I feel it is safer to be in a jungle. At least I feel safer in a jungle than I feel in a city.
Okay. Were there moments where you were overwhelmed by pressure? Because this field is dominated by men. Was it overwhelming at any point in time?
So
Were there times where you had to push back to break stereotypes, like to just put your thoughts on the table?
Of course, that is a given. I have had that. I've had to face it. I still continue to face it sometimes. They don't feel that you have. In a couple of times, I've had, even when it comes to like hiring camera people and hiring technicians for your film or for your crew. Many a times they don't want to work with you because you're a woman. They're not willing to take orders from you because you're a girl. And sometimes you end up hiring a person, or talking to a person who is older than you, and then that's an even more bigger ego problem to handle. So yeah, and they really are not receptive to taking orders or taking feedback from a young filmmaker or a young girl especially. So yes, that is something that I still continue to face. But now I've just learned to pick and choose and work with the right kind of people, so with whom I know that I will have a good rapport and a good team spirit. And now I have established my own team, so I know the people with whom I'm very comfortable. They understand me, I understand them. I don't even have to tell my cameraman or my editor what my vision is. I just have to explain to them once and they already get it. So now I have a set team, and it's super enjoyable working with them.
What would you like to tell the young girls like my niece, how to approach this to make it a full-time career?
I would say if you're really passionate about wildlife, because get into wildlife only if you're really passionate about it. Not because if you feel that there's going to be thrill and adventure and looking like you get to wear khaki clothes and go out there and be like Lara Croft exploring. Every time it's not that adventurous as it looks on screen. Sometimes you have to undergo a lot of challenges, like for example braving extreme weather conditions, improper sanitation facilities. It is a tough task to go, especially to spend time on the field. So unless you're really passionate about it, then go for it. Don't let your gender limit your dreams. never think that I'm a woman or I'm a girl, I can't do something. Just because I'm a girl, you can do everything. Okay, there's nothing like you can't because you're a girl. You just have to have that passion. You need to have that perseverance, that patience, and that willingness to work really hard and to be able to push yourself so that you can get results. So as long as you have that drive in you, just go out there, sky's the limit.
A person just texted me on WhatsApp, and the question there is, can you ask Aishwarya if it is possible for an organization to screen her films in their cities?
Yes, definitely. They can reach out to me on email or on Instagram, and then we can take it forward.
Okay. Let's go back to Panji for a while,
Okay.
because for me it is fascinating, and I have mentioned to you why it is fascinating. And there
Right.
is actually another guy, Joy Ganguly. The surname suggests that he's also a Bengali,
Yes.
and he mentions that thanks for sharing your passion. How can civil society members anywhere in the country create inspiring movies or other forms of visual communications like you did?
See, storytelling, I feel, doesn't need to have a great camera. Because when I started out, my first two projects were shot with very basic camera gear. I mean, there was no red, there was no CN20s, and there was no expensive equipment and expensive tripods or gimbals for my first two films. They were just made with a whole lot of heart, and the story was really good. I remember even during Maya, like when I began pitching Maya, the first reaction to Maya was, "Oh, this is not 4K, this is not on a red camera." But still, Nat Geo came on board because they saw the story, they saw Maya's heart in it. So it all depends on the story that you have. You can have the most basic camera gear as well and yet produce a story which people will really sit up and listen to, and it can touch people's hearts as long as the story is great and you have a very good soulful message at the end of it. So anyone and any person out there can make a film. You just need to have a good story.
With Panjay, you moved beyond just a good story, right?
Yes.
Like from field work, from seeing the world change, which I believe a lot of us in our generations, we have seen newer cities being made, from Mumbai now has a extremely developed Navi Mumbai. There is,
I
you
live
know,
there.
yes, Delhi is getting expanded, Calcutta is getting expanded. We have all seen our surroundings change. From there to making a movie, the kind of field work that you did, knowingly, unknowingly, out of passion, but you had an archive of things. From there, walk us through how it landed up in Bombay High Court.
So see, when I started doing Panjay, I obviously made the film thinking that I want to save the place. So after the film I finished, I put it up on YouTube initially and began sharing it with all the local members who are interested in wildlife, local bird watchers, etc. Parag began also sending it on Instagram, on Facebook, everywhere. And that's how the movie started getting a word of mouth initially. Then I went and showed it to Sidco. I got connected with organizations like Nat Connect and there's Mr. Nandakumar Pawar as well, who's been working a lot for Panjay. There's Mr. B.N. Kumar. There's Mr. Stalin as well. So I reached out to these personalities who had been working to protect wetlands, and I shared the film with them, and I told them that, and they had put up public interest litigations at the court. Okay, including CAT and several other organizations had filed already litigations in court to protect Panjay. And then there came a time when, because the movie also inspired a signature campaign, we did a huge a nice change.org signature campaign to save Panjay. There was a lot of results that came about in that. So we submitted that also to the court and to the Forest Department of Maharashtra. And because there was so much of talk that was happening around Panjay, what happened was the developmental authorities who had sanctioned of Panjay to be a part of an SEZ, they put up sluice gates on Panjay. And that on and that too, the sluice gates were positioned in such a way that it blocked the main inlet of tidal waters. So overnight, after I think about 6 months after the movie released, 6 or maybe 4 months, I'm not that sure, but Panjay's inflow of water supply just stopped. And one fine day, I get a call from Parag's, and I had actually lined up a media house to come there and show him Panjay. So there was a reporter with whom I had spoken. It was a Marathi news channel, and I had told him that, look, they were doing an interview of mine in Hindi because I can't speak Marathi at all. But he somehow had convinced him that, you have to showcase Panjay for saving it and all. And the cameraman and the reporter were to come to Panjay that day. And I greatly took them to Panjay, and I told them it's a beautiful location on the drive, I was telling him. And when I reached Panjay, it was dry. Like dry as in completely dry. It looked as if it was a parched land. And I had fed this reporter so many stories of beautiful Panjay that he looked at me as if, I had lost it and I had taken him somewhere else only. But then that's how, so together, I showed him pictures which had GPS data and all. And I told him, look, I'm not telling lies. Panjay is really beautiful. I don't know what's happened to it today. So then, luckily, he was willing to investigate with me on that same matter. And then we discovered that these sluice gates had been placed. And so then we clicked pictures of that. I clicked photos of those sluice gates with GPS data on my camera. I gave that as evidence to support the litigation. Then we started a media campaign of about 1 week where we put in tremendous pressure on CIDCO and the other developmental bodies. And finally, the gates opened. So that was like how the impact campaign transformed from the film. So, and now, of course, Panjay is listed as a wetland of importance on the Central Asian Flyway. It's listed on the National Wetland Decadal Change Atlas, which was prepared by the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. So yes, Panjay has got a lot of attention now. The National Green Tribunal ruled to protect it. So there's been a lot of positive updates on Panjay. So hopefully it gets declared as a conservation reserve soon, because that has been our push right from the beginning.
So all the people that you approached, all the stakeholders, were they all very supportive of it, or did they, or at least there was somebody who said, it's nature, just let it be?
No, all the organizations whom I approached, especially the non-governmental organizations, they were extremely, extremely supportive, starting from BNHS, starting with the Nat Connect, with sorry, I'm having a bad throat.
Take your time, it's perfectly all right.
With Nat Connect, with CAT, which is Conservation Action Trust, which is Nandakumar Pawar's organization, Shri Ekvira Pratishthan Foundation, which is Nandakumar Pawar's organization. CAT belongs to Devi Goenka sir. So BNHS, then even with Stalin sir's organization, Van Shakti, all of them were really, really supportive, and they were also championing for protection of Panjay. So it was all, I would say, a collective and a community effort to save Panjay.
This gives me so much happiness to even listen to the story. But then again, I see this as a way where all forces united.
Yes.
Where visuals were one aspect of it.
Correct.
But the visuals kind of become a catalyst into making things smoother for Panjay. Did I get it correctly?
Correct. Absolutely. The visuals became a catalyst to move things forward to protect Panjay.
Let's talk a bit about your research for filmmaking. While in this conversation, you mentioned at least 5 films.
Yes.
Right. When you look back, when you deconstruct the entire thing, do you have a formalized structure into researching your research approach? Like, we tried exploring as to what encourages you to make movie on something. You spoke about Maya, Ferocious Tigress. You spoke about Panjay, your childhood go-to place, but it was losing its impact, its value, its beauty. After Maya, you wanted to do on the rest of the two cats. And then about tortoises, which is facing sufficient exploitation and trafficking. So we see some pattern there, that you are emotionally moved by some subjects. So now that is there. Now you know you want to make a movie on this. From there till the final product, what is the research procedure like?
So, see, now I do have a more structured research process because now I have formalized a company. I founded my own production company called Bambi Studios. So now it's no longer, the story. I also actively find stories now. Earlier, I used to go by whichever story found me, I would end up telling that. Now it's a more structured, more professional approach as to I find stories, a lot of times that story ends up through just reading things up on Google or your newspaper, and something just strikes you and then you start looking further. Like for instance, the tortoises story, that was a story where during the pandemic I was sitting and browsing cute cat videos on YouTube. I was literally browsing that because I had nothing else to do. It was the pandemic and everything was under lockdown, and that's when I came across a pet video which had a pet Indian star tortoise, and that really startled me as to how come you have a pet, a wild animal as a pet. I mean, how is this even possible? And that led kind of one thing to another. I began to investigate the matter, and then I found that, oh, this is a big illegal trade that's happening. This needs to be documented, and this has to be stopped. So that was that thing. So a lot of times I end up just reading. I spend a lot of time reading on the internet, looking at different websites, different news items, constantly just keeping myself up to date as to what's happening in the world. And I think from there I end up getting most of my stories. And sometimes it's also some friend, like for example, the leopard film. The leopard film, I was really confused about the place that I wanted to do a leopard film on. Mind mein to tha ki yes, I want to make a film on leopards, but which would be the best place, I had no idea, because if you look at the leopard demographics in India, it's found pretty much throughout India. There's no such it's also found in cities, like for example Mumbai has leopards. So that I was wondering as to which location would be ideal. Should I go to Kabini for leopards, or should I go to Javai in Rajasthan? And then a friend of mine on Facebook, he kept tagging me pictures from Jalana forest in Rajasthan. And I happened to open it, and I happened to see this lovely looking male called Rana, and he was so bold. The pictures of him looked really different compared to other leopards. So I said, let's take a chance. Let's just go for a holiday to Jalana, and let me see what comes about from that holiday. So I took a family holiday, in fact, to Jalana. And that made me decide, no, this is the park I want my leopard film to be based upon. And that's how the story of Jalana unfolded. And today that story is extremely close to my heart because I've witnessed moments with Rana that I would say no one has ever seen with leopards. Once the film comes out, you all will know. But there are moments of natural history, of behavior in that film, which till now nobody has associated with leopards.
But then again, you are dealing with real animals. Okay,
Yes.
these are not animations.
Absolutely.
You also cannot direct a leopard and say, go jump on this.
I cannot.
So
I cannot.
So how do you plan for that? Like it takes, I believe it takes, I've been trying to make videos of hornbills. I think it takes an entirely different level of skill to be that patient, waiting, and always being alert. How do you prepare yourself for that?
See, of course, there's a lot of patience. Initially, I was not a patient child. I have become patient because of my wildlife photography in my teenage years. I was very, very impatient on my first visit to a tiger reserve. I remember pestering the driver so much, saying, "When will I see a tiger? When will I see a tiger?" He also was
My
quite patient.
my brother would have scolded you.
He was quite patient with me because he saw an 8, 9-year-old child asking that. So he thought, okay, it's a small kid who's kind of pestering him for that. But the number of years that I spent as an amateur photographer during my school and college time, that gave me a lot of patience. That made me accustomed to be in the wild. It made me realize that yes, you have to wait for long hours to get behavior. You also have to end up, yeah, that taught me a lot of patience. Apart from that, of course, I work with the people from that place. So in my team, I ensure that I have local indigenous community members with who have been tracking the leopard or the tiger or the lion, who know the behavior of these cats really, really well. And we as a team lean on to their knowledge. And all the three films wouldn't have been possible without local support. Especially, I would say, special mention in Maya to Vinod and Praveen. They are guides in Tadoba. Their tracking skills are excellent. Excellent means excellent, above par, I would say. Once I remember we were tracking this male tiger called Matkasur, and we got information that he had gone to a particular part of the forest, and the first thing Vinod asked the other guides were which path did he take to go to this place, and they gave him an X path, and he told me within 1 hour we will go on top of a hill called Jamunbodi, and we'll wait there. You will see Matkasur there. And I was like, how is that even possible? And he said, you just wait, don't at all think, come to Jamunbodi, wait for about, it'll take about 1 hour. Okay, we'll take a roundabout route, try it for Maya, and then we'll go to Jamunbodi. But within 1 hour, we need to be at Jamunbodi. Correct. I reached Jamunbodi maybe at about 50 minutes, waited for 10 minutes, and then we saw Matkasur come walking head on. And that became the opening shot of Matkasur in the film. So that is the level of tracking that they have. That's the knowledge that they have of the particular animal, the route the animal takes, the path they go. Same with Jalana as well. I have had the fortune of working with the best tracking team in Jalana, Mr. Hemant Dabi, Bunty, Raju, there is... this time we had Sunny. They are excellent trackers and drivers who are able to really, Hemant is my field producer as well in the film, and they're able to really predict the animal's movement. Now, leopards are very elusive. They're very shy animals. And till I went to Jalana, my leopard luck was pathetic. I had seen one leopard in Tadoba. That's it. And I ended up missing all leopard. I've never had leopard luck, okay? But when I entered Jalana, it has rained leopards for me. And I really feel it's the tracking skills of these local, community members through whom I'm able to cite them. So as a team, I firmly believe without local support, without their involvement in your story, I cannot make a world-class film.
So in a way, the local support, the guides are kind of stakeholders into your filmmaking.
Absolutely.
Patience is a skill.
Yes.
Tracking is a skill. Making story out of living beings whom you cannot direct is a skill.
Yeah, it is, because if you notice, there are no retakes in the wild.
There's
no retake. I mean, I cannot tell Maya to walk from point A to point B in golden hour. She will walk if she has to. And whichever way she walks, whichever frame she presents me with, I have to employ my creativity at its best and shoot that in a cinematic manner. Similarly, even with the weather in wildlife, I can't predict. There are days when it'll pour. There are days when it is very cold and there is no tiger movement or there's no leopard movement. So it's a very unpredictable, and uncertainty is quite regular on the field. But that's something that we have to learn to deal with. And that's when having a good team counts, having, good tracking skills count. Sometimes we track based on pug marks. Every day into the jungle, it's a new day. You track based on pug marks and based on alarm calls. Now I'm getting the hang of it. After having tracked for so long, now I can say reasonably confidently that I can also track. My predictions are not that way off. I mean, 80% it hits. So now I can
That is a lot of percentage.
yeah, now I can tell that after having spent like almost 10-15 years following cats. Initially, it started off as just a hobby, just a passion, and then it became a profession for the last 3-4 years.
So, what new concepts motivate Aishwarya now?
I'm looking to explore and develop a series. In fact, I'm working on a series. My company and our team are working on a series right now. We are a lot of other feature docs and one-offs are also in development. I really can't talk much about it, but yeah, there's some exciting content coming, which we are planning to make very soon.
You have mentioned that um, the best way to get to know what topics you can make films on is basically news.
Yes.
So, for young aspiring movie makers, what kind of newer threats do you see coming up in the wild right now?
See, wildlife trafficking is a continued threat, I would say. Another is man animal conflict, of course, habitat loss, climate change. Okay, these are topics which have been there for years, and they're still continuing to evolve on a daily basis. So the threats are more or less will remain the same. It's just the urgency which keeps changing, and of course, the urgency is only increasing with regards to species protection, with regards to our the crisis that our planet is facing, because we are literally living through the sixth mass extinction. Okay, the amount of natural calamities are increasing, extinction is happening at a faster rate. So it's either we are at a tipping point right now. It's either now or never, and it's how we take what's the course of action that we take today which will decide and shape the future of our tomorrow. So I firmly believe that I don't want my grandchildren to wake up in a planet where they can't breathe air, they can't drink its water. I really want them to see what a tiger looks like and to be able to go to a jungle and experience the same thing that I experienced as a child. So that's my small way of contributing to people's thoughts and people's actions. That look, here's a pretty tiger. If you fall in love with this, you'll want to protect it. That's the way I do
Talk,
storytelling as.
talking about grandchildren, what do you think is like a dream project of yours that at the age of 80, when you look back and you tell your grandchildren about, you'll be extremely proud? Which is not Maya, which is not Panje.
Yeah, it would be. See, I really want to document the world's wildlife, and maybe it would be like a mega series that picks out the lesser known characters, the lesser known animals of India and the world, and make a series about them, because you have enough spotlight on the megafauna. The big five, the big cats. There's a lot of attention that they already have got, and I've also done on them. So and now I'm looking at exploring the lesser known creatures, the side characters, you can say.
Talking about the side characters, Nimish asks, what are the other wildlife species you would like to cover and in possibly which locations? That's a very direct question.
It's a very tricky question. It's a very difficult question to answer. I would love to explore the macro world of the Western Ghats, the tiny world.
Macro world of the
Yeah, the tiny world of
macro.
Western Ghats. Yeah, the
Yes.
snakes, the reptiles, the amphibians of Western Ghats.
A lot of people are trying to work on a lot of things in the Western Ghats, whereas very less people are really interested in exploring the Northeast.
Yeah, of course, the Northeast. The Northeast definitely is. My dad's like a big fan of the Northeast. He's grown up, in fact, in Bengal and the Northeast side. So for him, his heart beats for the Northeast, and he's been asking me so much to visit Northeast, and which even I do want to visit because it's a place which is so beautiful. I've heard a lot of stories of Northeast, so I would love to explore the Northeast.
I will tell you more stories about the Northeast.
Great. Maybe then you can be one of my inspirations to shoot in the Northeast.
Chitra asks, what's your take on responsible wildlife tourism?
It is very important. It is being neglected, hopelessly right now. Uh, Very few people understand the concept and the meaning of responsible wildlife tourism. When you go to a park, you have to remember that you have to maintain the sanctity of that place. You are a guest in that forest. It does not belong to you. But when I end up shooting in most of the national parks that I end up shooting, I see people can do anything for a shot. Please don't be that way. You respect the animal will respect you back. Give the animal a space. If I feel even remotely that, after this point, there's a chance that the tiger or the lion can get disturbed, I tell my team, pull back. It is okay. We don't get that close up. It is fine. But it is that animal's a peace and that animal's tranquility which has to be maintained at all costs. Imagine someone thrusting cameras down our neck and infringing our privacy. We won't like it, right? So it's the same thing with the animal. Maintain a respectful distance and shoot. By all means, shoot. But have a line and draw that line very clearly. Never cross it. And you have to be ethical at all times. I'm a real big believer in ethics. Always ensure that you're treading the right side of ethics. When you're entering a jungle, maintain peace, maintain quiet. Do not wear loud clothes. Do not litter in a jungle. You go for a picnic to a jungle, please do not throw single use plastic there. So yeah, these are little things but which will go a long way in protecting our planet, and of course in you being a responsible tourist. Always leave a place the way you would expect to see it for the very first time, which is clean and undisturbed.
You mentioned that we are okay with development, but not at the cost of
Yes.
wildlife. There's this lady, Payal Narayan. I think is this question visible to you?
Yes, upcoming destruction in Nicobar, is that the one? Or
Yeah. Would you like to answer that?
building of the megapole like Hong Kong destroying primary rainforests. I would love to do a film on the upcoming destruction in Nicobar. If I can make a difference by protecting Nicobar, why not?
And if you do, just call me.
Yeah, please call me so I can get more information on it and I can talk to you about it. If you have access and all, please do call me.
I don't.
So I'm
But-
saying to Payal, if Payal has
To Payal.
please, any this thing, you have please do call me. That's a very beautiful thought, Nimish, which is leave a
Yes.
destination better than it was found. I
Yes.
said at least keep it as you would like it to be, when you see it for the
Yeah.
very first time, clean and undisturbed. But if you can leave it better, great. If you can be a person, who picks up the trash that you see in a location and disposes it off, kudos to you. Please do that.
I do that.
Great. So do
I have
I.
seen my friends do that.
So do I. I mean,
I wish we could have a longer conversation.
so do
but-
I. It was enjoyable. Very nice talking to you.
And it didn't really feel that we have crossed 1 hour.
No, I didn't feel that too.
Your internet worked, my internet worked. We had good amount of people coming in. Very good questions. Questions are still pouring in. Let me check if I can ask one.
Yeah, we can definitely take some.
Would you like to also explore underwater animals?
Oh, yes. Definitely. In fact, COVID threw a lot of my plans for underwater, literally underwater, because I wanted to learn scuba diving and diving. So now I will be going back and starting that. So yeah, I would love to explore the underwater. It is something that is definitely on my bucket list.
While talking to you, I have this feeling that we can actually have, we already have a common ground on which we are trying to do different things from different perspectives with very different resource sets and very different locations. Maybe we can have a collaborative platform where we openly have these discussions, like not just
Sure.
one-on-one in the podcast format, but in a bigger group, of
We
people.
should. We definitely should. In fact, the more conversations happen around sustainability, around a shared planet, about conservation, the more people will know. And today, it's not just about telling people that, oh, our Earth is going to get finished, our species are going to get extinct, we are going to not survive. That is literally doom and gloom, and no one wants to hear it. After a certain amount of time, people will be like, it is getting too much. Let's just switch it off. I don't want to listen
Yeah.
more about it. But if you tell somebody that, look, there is a problem, yes, we are going through a crisis, but wait, all is not lost. There is still so much that's left protecting on our planet, that's worth saving, that's worth fighting for. Then people get the inspiration and say, oh yes, there is still something left to live, we can make a difference. So that's the stories that I kind of end up telling. I don't focus on the doom and gloom. I focus on the hope that there is a silver lining. Every dark cloud has a silver lining. We still haven't lost it all, and it is now or never. So take the right steps, take the action right now.
Right after saying what I said last, I realized that the Global Wildlife Fair aims to be such a platform where different stakeholders from across the globe, this time it starts with India in Delhi during October, but it also tries to get people from across the globe come, have honest conversations with each other, not only in the domain of conservation but also in the domain of ecotourism and responsible wildlife tourism. This plug was unintentional, but the conversation came this way. So I thought it's very worthwhile to mention that it's not only our generation, us the younger people, but also the experienced people. They are also doing their bit in pushing it to a point where different stakeholders could come on board. Kudos to Mohit ji, and kudos to all other stakeholders of Global Wildlife Fair. Aishwarya, this is such a pleasure talking with you.
Same here. Thank you so much for having me on this podcast. And really, thank you, Global Wildlife Fair, for inviting me and starting a conversation around conservation. Thank you so much.
Bye bye.
Bye. Thank you. Have a lovely day.
You too.